it?
Right.
I'm sure he waits around the corner for me just to get on a call.
Right then. Good afternoon, everybody. And today I am interviewing Kate Blake, who is a coach, and she's also written a book called I Will If You Won't Let Me.
It's a tongue twister.
And you can get that book still on Amazon. And I believe, and Kate will correct me if I'm wrong, all the money goes to Women's Aid from the sale of that book. So I think it would be a good investment for anybody to buy that book, especially as it's supporting Women's Aid.
Mm.
So, going with the title of that book, do you remember as a child saying, I will if you won't let me?
I remember more my parents telling me that's what I used to say as a child. So I wasn't a naughty child, but I had a slight defiance in me. And apparently that was what I used to say, which was, it came back to me actually when I was writing the book and I was trying to think what to call it. My parents passed away quite a long time ago. My adopted parents, I was a doctor, so a while ago they passed away some time ago. And it was almost like they were telling me to call it that, really. So it was. I remember actually mentioning it to my brother, and he was like, "I remember you saying that." Yeah, and I think that was just my little thing. If I liked to climb trees, I was quite rough and tumble, and they would say stop doing that, and I would say, well, I will if you won't let me. And that was just my little saying of defiance if someone told me to stop doing something that was a little bit naughty. But also it has followed through, I guess, in my life, as far as people telling me I couldn't do certain things, and I thought, well, I'll be the one who decides that whether I do that or not. So it was a good one to sort of fill in with the feeling of the book, really.
Yeah. So going on your school education, was that challenging for you? And did your parents help you in any way?
Yeah, school education was challenging for me, and I didn't realise, and I didn't find out, so I went into later education at 35-ish. I didn't realise until then that I was dyslexic. So growing up in the 1970s, that wasn't really something that was particularly recognised, so I was not seen as particularly clever. My parents were both teachers, and they were great. You know, they would try really hard to help me do things. My dad knew that I learnt through story, so he was a historian, and he would tell me things through story, which, you know, I will remember always because of the way he made it interesting for me. Mum, I can remember her trying to do maths with me, and I can't see maths very well, and considering I'm in construction, I'm in finance, I can see financial maths, but I couldn't be a structural surveyor or anything like that, or structural engineer, because everything would just fall down, because I just wouldn't understand the maths of it. It just, you know, formulas and that sort of thing just wouldn't work for me. Financial maths I can understand, but anything that had codes in it and a mixture of words and letters, numbers and letters, I would just get them back to front, so it wouldn't make any sense to me. I can literally remember my mum sitting down, you know, with she used to bake a lot, and she'd have a cake and she would cut it into sections to show me sort of percentages and various things like that. So it made no sense to me at all, and I could see, as most math teachers always would, get really frustrated with me. However, my dad could tell me history stories that I would just sort of lap up, and, you know, he would be very interested in this time, actually, because he was very into we should be telling honest history. He was very much into that. He always said to me, and it's something, you know, I say to my children, you know, in the olden days, we were horrible to each other. Everyone was horrible. It was a battle, a war, and everything. he would very much be saying we're actually living in one of the best times we could be living in this country, because you know, we're not sent to war, we're not sort of having to sort of travel 100 miles to go and get water or anything like that we can turn it up on. So he would very much tell me that he wouldn't paint a romantic picture for me of the past, but he would paint a picture of me that I felt, you know, that I could really sort of feel and understand. So history was always something I loved, which I went on to study later on in life when I realised I could study. So they did try and help me, although I left school with no qualifications because the teachers didn't really help me much. So I got from home was very valuable, but not from school.
Not from school. No. And you said in the book that you had the big NHS glasses, but you could not make sense of the numbers, and that was because of your dyslexia too. So you were numbers and letter dyslexic.
Yeah, and it comes in different sort of stages really, because I still don't really understand it, because you adapt to it, you know. I'm in my 50s now, so I've adapted to whatever it is. You know, had I been a young child, they'd have probably analysed me a lot more and decided what was the problem here, you know, but I've kind of adapted to what it was. As I say, you know, numbers just didn't make any sense to me. I would write things the wrong way round all the time when I was writing. So, and I would say things the wrong way around, like car park. I always said park, and, you know, there were always, I'm not going to repeat it, but there was always one when I asked for popcorn at the cinema, was one that I used to get the wrong way around, and if you put it the other way around, you'll see why I'm not repeating it, because it was many a times in my children come to the cinema with me and I tried to order something really horrific instead of popcorn. So my brain just literally puts things another way around, which is why when you know, I gave myself such a hard time writing a book, because it would never be right for me. You know, it would never be, I would never be able to see it as being right, even if, you know, and I've got to the point now, if there are some mistakes, well, that's fine, because that's part of me, you know, and we don't have to be this perfect thing. You know?
That's it. Well, I'm dyslexic as well. And mine wasn't
diagnosed. That then you recognise that in me
until I was 40.
Yeah.
And my education was, I enjoyed school, but it didn't make sense. And I think that's the thing. And it isn't until
it just doesn't make sense, and you think, why am I not getting this?
Why am I so thick? Why am I everybody else is getting, everybody else understands it. I'm sorry, I still don't get it.
And you do feel like you must be stupid, and I think, you know, I did, and you see in the book that a lot of my issues came from the fact that I thought I couldn't be educated, and I had to sort of move on from that, you know, to be able to move on myself, you know, to be able to say, okay, I'm not stupid. And actually, when you look in history, you know, there's a lot of very influential people that were dyslexic.
Yeah, that's it. And do you need the qualification?
There you go.
That's it. And do you believe that your brother led you astray?
Now, this was an interesting one when you said that, and I did mention to you that my brother passed away last year, which was very, very suddenly. He passed away. He was driving, actually, at work. He was driving to look at an office for his work, and he had a heart attack. So it was, and I'd literally spoken to him a couple of hours before that happened. So it was a real shock, just completely out of the blue. Do I think he took, well, in some ways, you know what, my initial answer to that was straight away, probably yes, in some respects. He was my big brother, and the family always gave him a lot of attention, and I don't know, I think perhaps in the 60s and 70s, you know, the boy was expected to do a lot of stuff. It was the boy who was going to, you know, go and do the qualifications. He got the private school, and he got all these things given to him as the boy, and I was expected to perhaps marry well or something like that. I don't know what they expected me to do. I was going to do something. I was going to marry well. and that was all I needed to think about. I didn't do that very well. Yes, I do. I've got a lovely husband now, but I didn't do it well at first. But yeah, I mean, I think I was looking for an identity. He was very cool. He was very sort of slightly sort of a bit of an anarchist, a bit of, he was sort of fighting against everything. But I think really inside, and when we have discussed this with each other sort of in later years, we were both feeling, although we had loving parents, we probably felt a bit of a lack of identity, not knowing where we came from, being adopted, and we were both looking for something. However, sometimes what we found wasn't really a good thing to find. When I look back on sitting on the beach when I was probably 14 and 15, and my brother sort of rolling a joint and asking, sort of see if I wanted to, maybe that probably wasn't something I would like my children to do to my older boys to do to my daughter. But I'm sure that my sons have probably encouraged each other down the wrong route from time to time, although looking after each other. But siblings can be a bit like that. I wish I'd never, in some respects, I wish I'd never sort of ever dabbled in those sorts of areas, because I think it probably held me back, and I think I had a lot more going for me than to sort of go down that route of sort of becoming a bit of a waster, a bit of a, I suppose I was a bit of a hippie, and but then it may not have made me. I don't know. I'd have been a different person, wouldn't I? So
it's part of your story.
Yeah, it's difficult to say. Yeah, difficult. I mean, my brother and I were very close, and I was always a lot more sort of down to earth, and Dave was always very he loved conspiracy and things like that, so he would always be looking for something and looking for some sort of angle on everything. And he would get very I was very much like, oh, just gotta put in some hard work, gotta sort of put in strategy and things will work out. And he was very much sort of like, looking for always looking for an easy way out. In fact, Dave was, he didn't like to, he was a bit, he actually admitted to me not long before he passed away, actually, that really he was quite mentally lazy, which he was. I never had that because my brain is very busy, so I was never had that luxury. I remember when I was coming up to 50, so it was the year before, because he passed away just before I was 50. And I remember the year before he said, oh, you're 50 next year, so you don't have to do anything now. You can just, just give up and just chill out. I was like, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. He said, really? I said, I've got so many plans, Dave. It's, there's so much I need to do. And my kids were growing up, and I was feeling that need to do more, But he was very much, an easy way out, really, person. Bless him.
So you
I do miss my big brother.
Sorry?
I do miss my big brother.
Yeah. So you had your first cigarette off your brother as well, and was that the journey of you smoking?
Probably, most likely. I used to see him with them in his pocket, so I used to think that was very cool. Although my friend's dad will always say that I was a bad influence on their daughter, because I used to nick my friend's dad's cigarettes as well and try and smoke those. So he actually mentioned that to me. I hadn't seen him for like 30 years or something, and he mentioned that to me. I remember when you stole my cigarettes, and I was so sorry. They always thought I was really bad, and my friend was like, oh, I'm gonna say it was me. It wasn't actually me. I just had one of those faces. Yeah. I should never have been smoking, because I was asthmatic, so I should have never been smoking in the first place.
So are you smoking now, or have you quit smoking? No.
Gave up when I was 34.
Yeah.
Just gave up. Yeah.
And how did you get over your panic attacks?
Counselling, I think. Interestingly, actually, my boys came round on the weekend for my birthday. We sat in the garden, all socially distanced, and they were having a bit of a giggle about that, because I used to take them to concerts, and every time I was at a concert, even if it's indoors, I used to have my sunglasses on, all the time, because I used to feel panicked by large groups of people around me, and also the lights sort of from things. And I think that in some respects was probably down to the fact that I was smoking a lot of marijuana as well, so when they were young. And it took me a long time to get all that out of my system. And when I did get out of my system, I haven't had panic attacks. So I think it was something to do with that and the reaction it was having to me. But also, when I realised I had a problem with panic attacks, I went to get some counselling. So that was a big help, talking it through and finding out what my fear was of being around people. And also, she helped me sort of stop smoking back then as well. So all needed to be dealt with in one big hit, really.
Yeah. And you certainly had a variety of jobs according to your book. And how did you cope having a young family and being a single mother? I mean, you had 2 boys at the age of 20, 19, 20.
Yeah,
how
and
did you
broken
cope?
relationships.
Yeah.
It was tough, and obviously during this lockdown time, my heart goes out to those people who are in flats and 2 little kids, and more than that, I had 2, and they were 2 boys. They would fight and fight and fight, and that's all they would ever do. And they would sort of play tricks on me. And it was funny, we do talk about, I mean, they're lovely now and they're grown up, so we talk about it now, and they would say, well, we used to play terrible tricks on it. I said, yeah, I was on antidepressants. You don't realise how bad I was at the time. You play these little tricks and they push me over the edge too. But I would see, they would be fighting all the time. It was tough. For me, it was tough to sort of think about how do I provide the next, the meals, the school clothes, the recreational stuff. I was really lucky I had my dad around still, because he used to take them and do a lot of stuff with them that I probably wouldn't have been able to afford had he not been there. So he would take them and take them to visit castles and implant them with the same sort of history lessons he gave me. So he was so, it was just so good to have him around. And he was quite old when I remember his 70th birthday when the boys were quite little. So he wasn't and considering he would do so many really, really active things, up to the time that he was sort of probably coming up to 78, 79, that he would do loads of very active things with them. He was just fantastic having him around, really, because I think if I hadn't I would have probably gone under a number of times. It's not if everyone, it was at the time as well, I had a few friends who hadn't got kids and they couldn't understand why I was always so stressed, because they just didn't get it, and it was hard. Every little thing that I did felt like so much effort was put into it, just even just going for a trip somewhere. I thought, I'll go for a nice family outing. They would probably end up fighting anyway, It would just end up really stressful, and we'd all end up fighting and then having to come home again. So it was always like everything was a stress with the 2 boys.
So your dad looked after the boys, did he, while you were at work?
Yeah, he would do, because he was a teacher, so he would have the 6 weeks off and stuff like that. So he would be able to sort of pop in and just make sure that everything was going. So we'd come in and I might have to leave them, not when they were very little, but when they were a little bit older, I might have to leave them for an hour while I went to it, and then Dad would come over as soon as he could and spend sort of the day with them, and stick them in the car and take them out. Or he did what they hated the most, and he'd make them sit and do work. And they hated that. They mentioned that the other day, and we used to hate that. I used to really, really hate it when Grandad made us do schoolwork. But they're still like, we wish we'd listened to him back then, but yeah, they didn't like it. They couldn't sit for 5 minutes. They wanted to attack each other. They've grown up into lovely boys, lovely men.
And when you went on holiday in Rhodes with your adoptive parents, and that's where you were attacked.
Yeah.
And you kept it secret from your parents. Did you keep it secret from your friend that you were meant to be looking for?
Yeah, I told her, and between the two of us, we kind of, didn't decided that. And trying to think back exactly what happened when we made a kind of pact that we weren't going to tell them, because we thought if we did tell them, we'd probably be locked up in towers for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Because we actually, having that sort of happen to you at that age, at that time, I felt there would have been a lot of questions about, well, what were you doing, what did you do anything to encourage it? It felt like it would have been brought onto me as if I'd done something to encourage it. In fact, as you read in the book, I was literally just sort of trying to find my friends, and if it hadn't been me, it would have probably been someone else that guy would have attacked, because that's clearly something he was clearly a rapist, and that's what he was doing. However, I just felt that I couldn't tell them, whether it was down sort of as an adult looking back now. I wonder whether I thought they would be disappointed and I didn't want to disappoint them, whether they'd be angry, whether, they would probably have gone through a lot of guilt themselves for, not sort of keeping hold of us, because you do get sometimes this idea where you're abroad, you're on holiday and you're in holiday mode and your guard's down, where as sometimes it needs to still be up there. We see enough incidents of these sort of things happening, but I don't know. I mean, I would hope that I talk to my daughter enough, and pray that nothing ever happens, but you'd like to think that your child would come to you and be able to have that conversation with you. For some reason I didn't give them the chance, and I don't know. I think I don't know how that would look if I had of. I'm not quite sure now. It's difficult. There were very different times back then as well, so I think times have changed a little bit in that. Although the levels of those sort of incidents are still massively high, but I think maybe sometimes people talk a bit more than they did back then.
So what would your advice be to anybody that has been sexually abused like yourself, to get over it, to go forward rather than looking backwards on it?
To talk about it, because it won't have been your fault. So it's to talk about it, to go and get help, to go and see an organisation like Women's Aid. Interestingly, I was doing a book talk just about Christmas time, and there was a chap that had actually been working with Women's Aid, because he'd been abused as a child, and he was in his mid to late 50s, but he'd been abused as a child for many years, and he hadn't said anything, and he'd reached out to Women's Aid later in life, literally a couple of years previously, and he's now actually, he sent me a message the other day. He heard me talking and he's actually written a book about it. Apparently it's on Amazon now. So it's talking. The only way you heal, I think, is actually by realizing that you're not to blame for these things, and to find ways of moving forward is by sort of talking to people who are trained in that area. We can talk to our friends, and I did talk to a few friends myself, but I needed to talk to people who understood about this sort of issue, people who were trained to be able to sort of help me. And so I think definitely going for counselling, some form of trauma coaching, if that's the way you want to go. But also there are places like Women's Aid that you can go and speak to, and rape crisis, and those sort of charities that are there, that do amazing work with victims of this sort of crime. So definitely do talk about it.
And at what age did you know you were adopted? Because obviously you were adopted as a tiny baby, from what I can gather, and they'd already got your brother.
Yeah.
So at what age did they tell you that you were adopted?
No, I think they must have been very young, because I don't remember being told, but I always remember knowing. So I always knew that my biological mum, her name was Sue, so I always knew that it was Sue. I don't remember seeing where it written down. I don't remember being told, but it was always something that they were very open about. And we discussed it as it wasn't a hidden subject within the family, which is interesting because I have heard of other, people in my family actually who have kept it quiet, and they've not found out till they're older that they weren't actually their parents, so it is. I was lucky to be told, and I was lucky to understand that. I can remember telling people at school the once, and then in junior school, and then nobody taught me. They said, "Oh, she's adopted," and it was like, "Oh, really?" So kids can be strange. So I remember that, but that's the only time I ever felt. I used to have fear sometimes of someone coming and taking me from my family, and that was a fear. So strangers coming and taking me, that was, as growing up, that was a fear, because I was, my parents were great, and they'd sort of really mom was sort of the best mom for a little girl to have. She was cuddly, caring, and everything that you could have, really. So but I did worry, and funnily enough, talking to my biological parents, they did say back in the 70s they got back together, and they were actually looking thinking, well, how do we get her back? I was feeling like someone's going to come and take me, and they were thinking about it. So it would have never happened though, because I think once you get adopted legally, they can't just come and take you. So it would have never happened.
No.
But yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine it was really traumatic for my mother, my biological mother. We've talked about it with her. She said it was horrendously traumatic.
Yeah, I bet it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you've actually met up now with your.
Yeah.
And have you met your dad as well, or is it just your
mum?
Yeah.
I deal with both of them. So my dad lives in just outside Alicante in Spain. My mum's in Southampton, and I'm really blessed to have a good relationship with them. And I know that had I been brought up by them, I would have been fine as well. It's just the times and what was going on in their lives at the time. People weren't, even though they were married, but when relationships broke down, people weren't very sort of, when they were young, the parents would step in, and people would step in and take children away. And I think the choice was taken out of their hands really a lot in that situation. But I feel like I've had, the parent wise, I've been very lucky. I've had problems in my life, but it hasn't really been down to the parents as such. It's more down to me and my decisions. So I've been very blessed with that. They are lovely people. But she had me for, I think she held me for about a week, and after a week they literally just came in and took me, and that was it. And I was in the National Children's Home, I think, because if I look at my adoption certificate, that says 1971, I think, on it. So I was born 1969, so I must have been in National Children's Home for some time. So they must, when they brought me back after going through the process of adoption, I must have been sort of a 1-year-old, just over. So I think I must have been in there for quite a while. But I had a spot of eczema on me, and that grew basically. When they picked me up, I had a spot of eczema on. They were like, "Oh, that'd be fine," and then it just exploded. So they had a lot to deal with my health issues as a child, I think. They did their best. They did a good job.
That's fair. So if you could live your life again, would you change anything?
I've thought about this a lot lately, actually. If you can change, I would like to have what I know now when I was a teenager, because that would make life a lot easier. I'd like to know what I know now, but that's never going to happen. And I do think if I do change things, so if I say obviously I wish what happened in Rhodes didn't happen, but if it didn't happen, I probably wouldn't have written a book, which probably wouldn't have helped people who needed to feel that someone else had gone through that situation with them, so they could speak up. So there's certain things I can look at and think, why did I do that, or that was stupid, and but I guess if again, I wouldn't have been able to help other people without experiencing these things myself. If I could go back and say, it would just be to go back to a certain point in time, and I don't know when it would be, but to have the knowledge and education I have now to go on with life with that. Oh, I'd be such a boffin. I'd be running the country by now if that was it.
Yeah.
But apart from that, I can't really, because if I if I wish those things hadn't happened, then I wouldn't be me now. I wish I'd made better decisions, but that was part of my learning.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one, that, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. Is there any parts of it that you would change?
Whole vision. Yeah, I did have this whole vision thing the other day, and I was thinking sort of along those lines. And imagine what point in my life, if I went back with all I know now, I mean, I would be a weird child if I had all the knowledge, and all the technology that we have now. It's very different to what we had back in the 80s. So I would be a weird kid. But
that's fair.
Yeah, but I wouldn't be me. I would be a completely different person. So it's a good thing to have experienced the things I've experienced, because maybe I've made the mistakes so I can help people not to make them. Maybe that's what the job is.
Well, thank you very much for your interview today. Is there anybody that wants to ask Kate any questions?
I would.
You would?
I would, please. Yeah.
Okay, I've recorded.
Yeah.
Do you want to turn the recording off then?
You want me to take the recording off? Would you want to?
No, that's okay. I just wanted to ask her about the book.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's fine. How can I help you with that? What do you want to know?
Well, I just wanted to ask you about your book, which you have written. Did you do sketches beforehand to write this book? Was it easy for you to write your book, or did it take you a very long time to get everything together, all your information, or did you just write it from your heart?
I very much wrote it from my heart. I had a coach at the time who had encouraged me to write it, and she kept me to quite a strict and tight schedule. And I think if I hadn't have had that, I probably wouldn't have written it as quick. I had picked it up occasionally to try and write. I thought, I'll try and write. And I had actually got about 5,000 words on a memory stick somewhere that I'd written a few years back. But I'd kind of not carried on with it, and I'd just put it up and put it down again. What I got into doing, in fact, it was on my mobile phone. While I was going from appointment to appointment in my day job, while I was sitting outside wholesalers and offices that I was going to have meetings, I would try and write sort of 500 words. And as I'd sort of put sections of what I wanted to talk about, it literally just came out, and it was quite therapeutic, to be honest. And in fact, for the first year, I absolutely didn't like my book at all. I like it now. I've really reconciled myself with my own story, because when I wrote it out first time, I was quite ashamed of what I wrote, and ashamed of almost my story and me. And I think in the last the more other people have read it and comment on it, and more other people have come up to talk to me about it, and more people have come to me through my coaching to be coached by me, it's actually made me think, do you know what, it's not really that bad. It's not, it's not necessarily the bad things I did, that it's about the turnaround to create the good part, and to create the good experience that's the important takeout from it. So it was therapeutic, but it literally all came out within, I think it was probably literally took me about 2 or 3 months to write it in the end. So it was like waiting to come out. And when I gave it that, it just all came out. And I think the first, when I first had it and it turned up, and it looked like this, and I had a company help me do it, and they did all the cover and they did all the bits and bobs that needed doing for it, and to help me marketing. And I was quite sort of like, when I started getting asked to come and talk about my story, I was quite ashamed of my story, and it's took me a while to sort of reconcile myself and think that's actually a good story. It's actually about the resilience. It's about the learning that I've took from it, which is the important takeout for people. So there may have been some dreadful things I did, but the idea is now that I can give money back to a charity that helped me back in the 1980s when I had no one else. You know, it's given me that ability to be able to help that charity now without sort of it took a lot to write it, but you know, I just have to market it now, and then I can send them money, which is always really nice. And I got to #1 the first day it was released as well. So
Okay.
I got to bestseller on the first day that it was released. So I was very chuffed with that. That was very exciting. And I think I'm #9 in women's autobiographies, women and young adults autobiographies at the moment. I'm about #9. So
That's pretty
literally,
good.
it will only take, that's nearly 2 years on. So it literally will only take, if people downloaded about 5 or 6 of those, it literally, I would probably be back up to #1 again, push it back up again. So, you know, I keep dipping in and dipping out. I usually give them Women's Aid half of the funds, but during this time of lockdown, I'm donating all the funds to them because I know they need it. I know my local Women's Aid has 48 women waiting to be rehoused at the moment. So, you know, I know there's a lot of problems with the lockdown and various sort of domestic violence and stuff. So, yeah.
I have a question. Firstly, I'm sorry I'm late. I had to go to didn't have to. I've attended a funeral today of my great uncle. I'm tearing back through traffic. In terms of your book, what's it called? Because obviously I've joined late, so I do apologise.
It's called I Will If You Won't Let Me.
Boom. Oh, sounds like every teenager.
I think I was saying it from about the age of 5 to my parents. So,
what do you do then? Obviously, you're #9 in the charts at the moment. What do you do to keep the book alive and fresh in terms of keeping it out there so people are aware of it? They're aware of, you know, what it's about, and they're aware of where they can go and buy it. What do you do at the moment to kind of keep it bubbling, I suppose?
Oh, that is the hard thing, really. It's like you have this thing, you have now this platform, and what do we do with it, you know, and how do you keep it alive? So I have to keep, I write every day on my LinkedIn, I write posts, I write blogs on my website, I do talks for people, so anytime someone wants to talk about my book, I'll come on and talk about my book. You know, Facebook, I put a lot of stuff on there. I had a bit of a worry at first because I thought, you know, friends and family are going to be, oh God, she's going on about the book again.
It's overloaded, yeah.
Oh yeah, she goes again on about the book, and I've had to kind of get past that because there are obviously people who haven't bought it, and there's people who want to buy it, and people who are interested in it. So I have to kind of get past almost the, you know, what other people think, and just sort of keep pushing it and pushing it. So any chance to talk about it, any chance I do sometimes on a Friday, I'll do sort of a book passage Friday, so I'll talk about the book on a Friday on LinkedIn, so I'll maybe post a chapter out of the book. But it's the first, when we first had it, because I was part of a big entrepreneur group that was doing the publishing for the books. You know, they do push it out to a very large network. But the weirdest thing for me actually was when it first came out that was October 2018, Christmas Day in 2018. I looked at my phone. I had a message from a lady in America who wanted me to talk about it in Colorado. So there's a whole group of people in Colorado that have been reading my book.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got a big book club in America that have all followed my book now. So I was supposed to be going over to do a keynote speak in Colorado this year, but obviously with the lockdown, it didn't happen. So my book is doing all right in America as well.
It's amazing. I mean, you know, and you did say something there, which I think is a problem that a lot of business owners face, in that they fear that they're going to, I suppose, talk about themselves too much and think that people will then say, oh, here she goes, like you said, here she goes again. The key thing to always remember as a business owner, and with what you offer as well, as you've already proved, your audience is global.
Exactly.
There's no chance that you're going to be able to get in front of 7 billion people you only actually want 0.01% of those people anyway. That's plenty enough. And always remember that it's a numbers game, but your audience, you can help people anywhere in the world. So
I've had people in Japan buy my book as well.
Wow.
So it is quite weird when you look at like the list of where people are buying things.
It's amazing.
Someone's downloaded it in Japan. That's brilliant.
Yeah. But what it proves though is that the problems that we think are personal to us are actually problems which 90% of other people have gone through already.
Exactly.
And the difference in, it's what I call it invoking emotion. I imagine that some people read your book and they're back in that situation that they were in, you know, going through the same thing. And that's where the connection comes of this lady knows me, she understands me, I understand her. So well done. That's brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So anyone else?
Any other questions? No?
So I'm trying to update something. That's the problem, isn't it, when things come up?
I like you to be quiet, John.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm supposed to be working, but I've acted in half a day around. I just kind of pop in as a guest. I haven't got one, I don't think, because you've answered really the ones that I sort of thought about as well, about marketing as well.
Yeah, marketing's always going to be a headache. It's always internet, you know. It's like,
marketing's fun.
I sometimes feel like I'm pushing a car up a hill sort of on my own, but you know, it does get like that. But you just keep going, don't you? Because you've got to believe in what you're doing, you know.
I think the key thing from a point of view of marketing, I think the nice thing for a business owner is actually seeing the effect of the marketing. That's where that's when it actually is fun, because it's like, this is this week. I wonder if I can do more next week.
Yeah.
You almost have a little game with yourself, so you're competing with yourself to do better than you had before. But the one thing I'd say to anybody where marketing is feeling like a frustration, just plan in advance.
Just block it out. I mean, I had a chat the other day. So my book has probably mainly been read by women because of the nature.
Oh yeah, obviously,
somebody phoned me the other day actually, and he'd read my book, and he's been helping me out with some social media stuff, and he's on one of the groups that I'm on. And he said I started reading it at 5 o'clock. Your book, he said, and I'd finished it really, really quick. He said, and I read it. He said, he said, you can see behind me, I've got loads of books, but yours is the first one I've read from start to finish and enjoyed it. He says, and it was such an emotional journey. He said, it really spoke to him, and when he was talking to me about it, he had like a little tear in his eye, because he's like, well, I can't believe you've gone through all that.
Invoke emotion.
Yeah, he was like, really, he says, and it made me think about sort of childhood events that had happened to me, and got me thinking about my family, and got me thinking about this. And I thought, this is good. It's, I'm writing as a dyslexic person a book that I could pick up and read myself really quickly and really easily.
Wow,
and that's what happened with other people. They've been able to read it very easily.
Wow. And are you part of any of the dyslexic associations or support mechanisms?
No, I've not really sort of got. They actually, as an ad, I only got sort of tested when I was 35, and I wasn't. It wasn't on a huge level, so it was something I'd learned to adapt and cope with. So I was like, no, I'm all right, I'll just carry on. But they kind of bared, when I went back to college, sort of at 35, they sort of really just they bear it in mind, and so asked me if I was all right with everything, and that I was. So it worked quite well.
I think as a role model, though, and this is where you could maybe elevate yourself a little bit more. If you think about it, you have a condition which affects a lot of young people, to the point that they won't even try and climb that wall, because as far as they're concerned, their life's finished. Now, to see people like yourself, real people, not your Richard Bransons and your Alan Sugars and these people, a real person who isn't like multimillionaire and swanning around, but someone who's been able to put her life into a book when to all intents and purposes, they're being told, well, you're not good at words. You have to just, I think that means you're a role model. That means that someone like you approaching maybe some of the dyslexic support associations and saying, look, I'd be happy to kind of share my story with the people you're involved in. So I can see there's no barrier to success.
I get a lot of people from like, I mean, I've been asked to go and talk on an adoption summit as well. So, you know, because it has adoption in it. So, and obviously Women's Aid always call me up when they need someone to come and talk.
Brilliant.
So I get sort of those sort of, but that's a good idea actually. I never sort of thought of dyslexic. Thank you.
I don't charge commission. You can have it all for free. But try. I mean, it's all about platforms. It's all about elevating your status because you quite clearly are about helping people. Well, this is the way of you helping people without doing anything different. You know, this is just you saying, "Look, I can do it. This is what I produce. These are the people I help, and I'm supposed to be dyslexic. So not being funny. Don't let it hold you back." And I think more people like yourself should be used as role models. I know that we've got some multi-billionaires, but a child from a council estate can't associate with Richard Branson or whoever. But someone like yourself
there are a lot of people who've done very successfully.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an interesting sort of condition to have, isn't it, in that way? So, although I think, like, you know, my brother was very academic. We did speak about my brother earlier because he does feature in my book, and he was very academic and he had no issue with sort of academia at all. He was very intelligent in that way, yet my brain worked in a different way, and in the end I ended up more qualified than he was. he passed away last year and I'm still qualifying, you know, so it's like I asked him even though I was overlooked as a child.
And that's amazing. And I think, and this is why I think someone like yourself, children right now, I mean, Karen will know this, they're going through a lot of mental pressure, all these things going on. I mean, we had it, you weren't Rose, and you know, it wasn't like a brilliant time when we were young, but I think it was a lot easier. And they've got a lot of mental pressures. You throw in any kind of, dyslexia, or there's another one for numbers and things like that. And, you know, they're already starting there and having to start from here. So having that role model, having that normal person who's achieved, having that person who's gone through adversity, even with what I've got, and she's still managed to do all these things, she's getting all these qualifications. It just removes barriers. It's almost like saying, look, there's no reason why you can't.
And there isn't. It's just the belief in yourself that you can do it, isn't it? And
absolutely,
that's where it starts.
Absolutely. Excellent.
Right.
Okay then. Well, thank you very much for
thanks so much
coming in today, Kate, and
having me,
sharing afternoon tea with us. And if you can let me know your details.
All of your links, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, website, everywhere.
Will do. I'll get that all sent over to you very short. When I'll go and get a cup of tea, and then I'll send it all over to you.
Okay then. Okay, then.
Right, guys. Thank you very much.
See you later, guys. Take care.
Bye.
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 Okay, bye.